I should probably say, because we just turned the recording on, so welcome to the May 3rd meeting of the Finance and Legal Guild for the Lifeboat Academy. We've done our intros and we were just getting into the agenda. And so our agenda today is debriefing the meetings with the lawyers last week and then debriefing the feedback that we received yesterday, looking at the invoice from the lawyer and talking a little bit about communication with Joey moving forward and how to manage that line of communication. So with that in mind, I'm gonna, yes, Barbara.
Just a small request out of personal self-interest. If we could do the Joey Steph conversation piece first, then if I have to slip away before we get to that, I won't miss it, and I would love to listen to that one. That's just a, as I say, a request.
Okay. Does anyone have any objections to that? Hearing none. I'll move that to the top of the list. And all right. So are we good with the agenda? All right. I guess to go into the communication with Joey part, Roland, do you want to provide a little context before we go around?
Yeah, well, and that was in part, just filling in on what we were, um, where we were, or yeah, giving a bit of an update. And then the other part was my insecurity around communication and respect, and what do I do to so Ben and I talked about it as sort of there's his response, and then we talked about it, and it kind of seems like uh, that really there is nothing to do until probably Monday. He said that he was busy until for this week, and that he would get in touch with us again, and that potentially on Monday I could write back to say, hey, either wait for him or do I write? And this is where I get really stuck. It's like, I know that there's stuff going on in everybody's lives, and I don't want to be a nag. And at the same time, I'm trying to keep things moving, and so I often find myself feeling very uncertain about what to do. And so I pause and I hesitate, and then time goes by. And so now that I've got you guys, I feel like I've got somebody that I can bounce things off of to be able to know, well, should I actually pause, or do I push forward, or what do I do? So that's the context. So
Perfect.
back to who? Back to
Well, I start with at the top of the circle with Becca. So thoughts, ideas, reactions, questions.
So I'm looking at the email that you sent, and you said that, well, actually, before I go there, I want to say I hear the angst, and it's totally understandable, and there's this huge power imbalance, and as a funder, I'm on the other side of it at times, and I get to be like, oh, I'm too busy, I'm not going to deal with that now, and I don't have the same sense of urgency that you do, and you, including staff, and so it's a dance, and so I guess it's just to say, be kind to yourself about having the angst, because it's part of the territory, unfortunately. And reading your email, he was asking for some of the finer details that you think the lawyers will provide. He was saying that investors are going to want a clear answer to questions like how do the shares work, which to me sounds like he doesn't necessarily want to be part of answering those questions. He wants us to figure out the answers, and then he would help communicate them. Is that, if that's the case, then I think there's no rush because we're not there yet in terms of getting back to him. If we want him to be helping us frame them or, you know, make choices, then sooner is good. You know, next week is good if he's available. Over to Roland.
Yeah, I think that to answer your question about how he wants to be involved, I think it's an also and kind of thing. The impression that I get is that he likes the idea and he wants to work with us to figure out how to make it happen. And he also hasn't volunteered to be part of any of the guilds. So I at this point, and he's completely I think the word probably would be forthcoming with he's not volunteering any of his own fortune, but that is also not out of the possibilities. So we are still at the getting to know you stage, and there have been a number of reasons why we are still at the getting to know you stage. Very understandable and valid ones. So yeah, I think that he wants to help figure things out. Probably at this point more in a consulting capacity, perhaps. Maybe that's the closest way that I have to describe it. So over to Barbara.
Thanks, guys. Seems to me there was two parts to this. It was Joey's involvement in the larger project, and there was some email conversation about having the debrief about the meeting with the lawyers, and then da 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 da. And the second part was connecting Joey and Steph in communication and conversation, and that's the part that I was kind of pointing at for this, for my suggestion to bring this forward in the agenda, because I think that, well, those are two separate things, and the connecting of you, Steph, and Joey for that conversation and that synergistic exploration or whatever, like just to see what that might be, is would be really good for that to happen. And it I don't know, is it kind of a backstop to the other, or back set of the other, or I don't know exactly. Like, it's not a conceptual thing for me right now. It feels kind of energetic, like just get you guys together in some way. And so the question is how to facilitate that, how to make that happen. And then the other piece, the first piece, will just unfold and evolve, and there's a whole lot of other process in that before Joey gets into the weeds of it. But the second one is connecting Steph and Joey, and that can be quite, if there's good flow there, that could just happen. It just is the logistics of it. And I see no reason to hold back on that. Like, it doesn't have to be a relational navigation of like what's best. Like, just do it. Kind of, it's my sense of it. I'm going to give it to Ben.
Oh, over to Steph, actually.
Sorry, Steph.
Okay, I have you muted because there's sound here. And yeah, so a couple things. I am thinking a couple things. I'm freshly thinking a couple things based on like what I've just heard. It does sound like he wants clarity, and probably clarity in terms of like what's the investment too. Like, even if he's not really asking for that specifically, he's talking about for the investors, what's the investment? Like, so he probably wants to know things in as a bullet point of a way as possible. And I think it would be good to wait until there's a really clear way to communicate the benefits of participating and the benefits for the community, but also the benefits personally, because he might not ask that, but I think he would want to know that. Yeah, if that makes sense. And I think, yeah, I also feel like just having a personal connection might in some way help. I don't know why, and that's more of an intuition than anything else. So maybe we shouldn't make choices based on my intuition. So yeah. But yeah, it sounds, and so that seems to me like a good time to reach out if it's like, okay, we've really clarified this XYZ process. This is it, like the nutshell version. Like this is a new update that we have to give you rather than we want something from you. And because there is that power imbalance, but I think it can be sorted out by us not needing him. And if something is really attractive, beautiful, and necessary for us humans, I think that we don't need him. You know, it would be great, but we don't need to feel like we're needy of him. If that makes sense. So if we could kind of take the desperation out and then wait until there's something clear that is like an update that should be communicated to him, then it won't feel so much like yeah, like, oh please, I know I'm bugging you, please answer my phone call. Yeah, does that make sense? Because we don't need one person, and in fact, yeah, no. Yeah. What do you think? On to someone.
Over to me then. I love Circle. I really it's so cool how much stuff comes out so well. I've got a couple things. I also feel like, so originally my hope was we would get results back from the lawyers the first pass. And that's actually kind of why I wanted to put this lower on the agenda, is I kind of thought we would, you know, get that sense of, I agree, Steph. First of all, I think it'd be great for you to meet him. He's just a really personable, grounded, easy to talk to guy. And I think he is thinking about, you know, he works with the people who we want to talk to regularly, you know, potential investors. And so he can, and I think he was doing this, he can channel the questions they're going to have, which may or may not be questions that he has that are the primary questions for him. I feel like you were talking about the what's in it for the community and what's in it personally. And I think he gets what's in it for the community, and sees that value. And he also knows other people are not going to put that for, you know, that's not going to be the top of their list. And they're all reasonable questions too, you know, like, you know, how does the investment work? So I was hoping that we would get the feedback from the lawyers and be like, oh, here's the bullet point list of how we can talk to people about this. And then that's the, we talked to Joey, here's what they're saying, what do you think? Oh, by the way, let's bring Steph in, you know, and introduce the two of you. Given the feedback that I just read, I think we don't have a bullet point list that we can hand you know, off. So that makes me think, yeah, let's move forward with just getting Steph and Joey talking to each other. And you know, you're both lovely people, and I think that you would have really just an interesting conversation, and we can facilitate that, whatever feels best for, you know, like I can just give you Joey's number, give Joey your number and say, you know, you two talk, or if you want us to be there, you know, to kind of like be the matchmaker and, you know, introduce people, then we can do that. Whatever feels right on you two. And I have that same feeling. I think like, and likewise in terms of needing him or not needing him, you know, he is an access point, or it feels like he's an access point to a lot of people who could really help with this, you know, moving forward. And and I think he's genuinely just interested in the project, so like, and he's on Pender now, right? He's got a stake here, like on the ground. And so, yeah, I want to keep him, I want to figure out how we can, loop him in, bring him in, get him excited about what can actually happen on the ground right here. And just trust that, however the connections with getting the investors on board, that'll also sort of unfold as it should. So I'm liking that idea of kind of a parallel track. We move forward to try to get to the point where we have the bullet points. I think Joey can help actually and that's, I think, anticipating the next part of this conversation. I think he can help us make choices about, because it sounds to me like the lawyers are saying we're going to have to compromise some stuff and or reframe some stuff. So I think that becomes the question about how do we see that conversation going back and forth to find that sweet spot where it still feels like it has integrity and it's still something we can communicate to the people who can make it happen on that financial side. So yeah, this feels anyhow. I have been taking notes, so I've got this written down, and I thought let's go once more through the circle and give everyone a chance to sort of, now that we've all had a chance to share the first round, what takeaways or additional thoughts. Over to you, Becca.
Enthusiastic yes to following intuition, and especially if it's in a relational direction. And so I love the idea of, and I love hearing from you, Stephanie, the perspective of we don't need him. Oh, she looks like she's talking to somebody else. And I also wonder about inviting him to attend one of these meetings. Like, not, will you join our guild, but would you like to attend a meeting of our guild at some point? Because I'd love to meet him, and also I think his perspective would be super useful. Roland.
Yes. Cool. So what I'm hearing is that move forward an invitation for Joey and Steph to meet. I want to say, and I want to say also that the fact that the Lifeboat Academy project for me is really integrated and multifaceted. One of the things that's really important for me is that everyone be treated like humans. And that's one of the places where I hesitate a lot in sending email, because I know Joey had a recent death in the family, which is why we didn't meet in January, and then et cetera, et cetera. So that's a lot where my hesitation comes from. And at the same time, I totally recognize that there's also this power imbalance where there is still the fact that we are looking for help in some way, and then trying to navigate that at the same as well. And I don't want to look like, oh, please, 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 we need your help either. So that's where there's a lot of stories that go around in my head, and having people to be able to bounce that off of and get clarity like this is really, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. And I'm wondering, Ben, if you would resend the document that you're referring to that has the feedback from the lawyers, maybe in the chat, if it's a Google Doc. And intuition is a perfect thing to introduce in the circle format, because what can be an intuition for you becomes feed for thinking for the rest of the circle, and that's how we complete each other in this process. And I also like the idea of inviting Joey to one of the finance and legal guild meetings, and I think it bears thinking also a little bit through to figure out, well, if what would that look like? What would we want to talk about, etc. So with all of that over to Barbara.
Yes. And I have nothing further to add. Yes to everything that just went round twice, and I have nothing to add at this point. Satisfied. Tickled too old enough to marry you. I'm satisfied. Steph.
Me too. It sounds good. Sounds good. Both the things.
Cool, cool, cool. All right. Well then, so it seems like we have two action items. One is we will figure out how to connect Joey and Steph. And I guess sort of as a side conversation, Steph, we can just talk to you about, how do we want to set that up? And then we will invite Joey. I'm going to propose we invite Joey to the next one if he can make it, because I actually think that makes sense where we are, talking about the bullet points of how we want this to work. And especially we'll have a little bit of a conversation today. We can see by the end of the meeting how we feel about that. But yeah, it kind of feels like I think we're all in agreement. It's a good idea. And we can offer the invitation, and then it's, about his availability and interest and all that. But we can offer the invitation pretty quick. All right, so moving on then, the next thing on the agenda is debriefing the meeting with the lawyers and the document. And first of all, a question, do we want to do that all in one go, both meeting last week and the document comments? Or do we want to debrief last week and then, like actually dive into the documents separately? So I'm going to do all together, put up one finger, or as two different things, two fingers. And that's how two separate things. I got 1, 2, I've got. I think the twos are leading. Actually, we've got. Anyone have an objection to dividing it up? Are there any objections? All right, cool. Let's divide it up, and then let's try to keep the debrief on the lawyer meeting quick, and then we can dive into the document. So Becca, over to you. Debrief on lawyers.
Yeah, I felt really good about the meeting. I felt like, oh yeah, this is why we picked them. They totally get what we're trying to do. And I'm hoping to still keep feeling that way as we deal with the the realities of working with them, both the legalese and the finances. Roland?
Same. I was so impressed with Bill's credentials, took on and beat Walmart, and wow, that was anyway, and a number of the things that he talked about. And at the same time, I am also aware of the legalese and limitations of that presents, and just where can we push to be able, because for me, one of the other things about the whole project is that we're trying to find ways to make it easier for people who want to be part of the land in a respectful way, can have access to it. And that means challenging some of the current ways of thinking and doing things. Anyway, so it's going to be, and I want to look at it as, isn't that interesting? And I want to look at it as, what can we do, and be grateful for what we can do. Over to Barbara.
Yeah, power team. I was quite happy to see the breadth of experience and perspective, and I guess orientation is the word I'm looking for there, with those two guys. And also, and this is leaking a little bit into the debrief of the comments on the doc, just a little, because it started to emerge then in that meeting, is that there's a bit of dismay at the magnitude of the gap between what is now in those realms and what what could be and how to bridge that gap, like how to get from from some of those comments to what we know can be like possible. We just don't know how. So I'm sort of dancing on that that really sort of razor sharp ridge of, oh my God, how can we possibly pull this off to, yeah, okay, if anybody can do it, maybe these guys can. Something like that. That's all I got right now. Over to you, Steph.
I guess I wasn't there, so I don't have anything to really add. But it sounds like they're not very lawyery lawyers, which is nice because I'm trying to do something unconventional. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I think I've got a big ditto on all of it. And so I'm gonna propose sort of the next round, getting into the document and the feedback. And I'm gonna propose first round sort of general impressions. I think, Barbara, you were already kind of moving in that direction. And so I'm gonna kind of build on that and with just general impressions. And it's that like, oh, because I had the same feeling. They get what we're trying to do. I think that I don't think the concepts aren't especially new or alien to them. It's just this question of, well, how do you do it? And I do think that we're kind of pushing, well, that's one of the questions. Do we want to try to settle into something that will be easier to sell? And ultimately, how we run things, as long as we have some protections, like we can set the bylaws so sociocracy is how all of the decisions actually get made operationally, and where there's, we have a built-in vote system as a backup in if, this system fails. So we could actually, I'm going to say, skate by with some legal documents that look very similar to another organization and then just run it differently. And with the financial stuff, it like basically, without getting into too many of the details, they're basically saying investors want a return on investment, and we've got to provide them with a return on investment. And so there's a question of what risk do we take on by, how much do we want to struggle to, because that is one of the key, like the Achilles heel of trying to do something like this, is that the economic obligations corrupt the decisions. They pull you in the direction of trying to make money. So how do we kind of protect that? And I'm getting sorry, I'm getting too far into the details. I think my general impression is it's kind of what Barbara was saying, is we know how we want it to work, and we know how the current conventional system works, and how much do we want to push against that, and how much do we want to try to see if we can kind of fly under the radar, or kind of figure out workarounds. And for me, ultimately, it is like, how do we make it work? Like that's the bottom line, is like, how do we pull together what we need? And maybe it's a reframing of what we're doing. But that's my first impression. It's basically, yeah, we're right there in that gap. So over to you, Becca. Thoughts on the feedback from lawyers?
So I'm just going to also throw in that the bill that we received from them indicates that we're already over 1/5 of the way through the total amount I have allocated to donate for this year. Like, it was a bill for $2,181 Canadian, of which I've already paid $2,000 as the retainer. So the $181 bill is the what we owe them on top of the retainer. So not that that should be so shocking, but it was a little bit more than I had hoped. And especially given the complexity of what we're looking at trying to do, which was clear from, that they would have all kinds of great ways to, like, well, you could have this entity that takes care of this part of what you're trying to do, and this entity that takes care of this part of what you're trying to do, but that would be, I can allocate some more from my next year's budget, but that's not until next year. So, so reading their feedback was a little bit discouraging, and their written feedback was a little discouraging in that, oh yeah, like there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of disconnect, as I suspected there would be, between what the reality of the legal system is and what these ideals are that we have. And so, a part of me, I didn't study it in great depth, but which we should do, but I came away from it feeling like if we don't want to worry about having to pay investors, investors make money, maybe this should be a nonprofit entity. Like if it's not for profit, maybe it should be a not for profit. Over to Roland.
I'm not sure why I didn't get the notices that there were changes to the document. And I glanced at it, and it's the same one that, anyway, I glanced at it, and because I'm colorblind, I think that they added in red. I think I'm seeing a difference in shade. So at a glance, it didn't look like there was anything, because I was looking for things on the side. But one of the things I do notice is at the bottom, there's a mention that there are things that can go into, especially around dissolution, that can go in the bylaws. So anyway, I'm a little confused about what part they're actually the incorporation versus bylaws. Yeah. And not having been actually part of the conversation on how the billing would work with like conversations with the lawyers around the billing, I was wondering, they're aware that they aware that we have a limited budget, and can we tell them what the budget is so that they fit their work within those parameters? So over to Barbara.
Yeah, I haven't had time to even read this, the comments. So this is at a high level then for me, which is what it is. It's fine. I'm just dwelling in that awareness space of, what's the best flow here? Because there's a few flows. There's flows of money, cash flow. There's flows of energy, our time, and our clarity and what have you. There's a flow of time, like what we want to do, and also value. There's a flow of value, like what, and prioritizing and being clear about what are the higher values. And so, man, navigating all that's a lot to do it in whatever I got here, 20 seconds or whatever. It's like, want the best return on all of those values. I want the best return on all those values. What it looks like to me is that we're going to need to do more and the lawyers less. So if we can like distill out what their key points are and then work with those ourselves rather than leaning heavily in on them to do it, because we don't have sufficient flow of cash, time, maybe value. I don't know that part. And just, always be like putting the priorities, keep being aware and keeping them at the top. We know we want to do things differently. However, we may need to, it is possible that we may need to consider acting as if, like doing a thing in a certain way that doesn't necessarily fully and forever serve the higher values, but get us through something. I think it was Robert Heinlein in one of his books, is like, just survive, like get it done. Like the highest value is whatever that is, like be alive or stay true to the thingy. And so that can actually, it might look like compromise, but it also is actually staying really true. Am I making any sense here? Like somehow we're going to be in the reality, down in the weeds of trying to figure out this thing in a way that satisfies all these different requirements and needs. I feel like I just moved my mouth for a few minutes and didn't really say anything, but I hope that it kind of sort of had some intelligence. And I'll stop now and I'll give it to Becca. Or sorry, not Becca, Steph. I knew I saw you, Steph, but I don't know why Becca came out of my mouth. It did. It's just a thing these days, me. Over you, Steph.
Yeah, I don't like have that much to add because I wasn't there and I haven't looked at the document, but I do think that jumping through hoops, if that's sort of what you're talking about, it's not really, might be something worth considering, or being a nonprofit, not-for-profit organization. I mean, maybe there's a different structure that is simpler, that won't compromise what we actually want to do on the ground. Yeah, I don't know. But I hope that they can figure it out within the time available, like you were also saying about prioritizing the lawyer time that is possible. So yeah, agree with everything.
Yeah, me too. And Barbara, you totally made sense to me, at least. So because that's that's why I like Sociocracy and Good Enough for Now, Safe Enough to Try. And the safe enough to try is important, right? That we want to make sure that we're making choices in a way that don't hamstring us in the future. I do think that I'm starting to come around to the possibility of a nonprofit, in part because one of the things here, I think part of the challenge is that nonprofits don't think entrepreneurially, and investors don't think socially, and we're trying to do both at the same time. And so it's hard. What I heard Joey saying is it's going to be really hard. As soon as we say investor, that's going to trigger a framework, a mental framework that is going to bring up certain assumptions. Whereas if we were to talk about an educational facility and looking for funders for an educational facility, then funders are going to think entirely differently about what they're putting their money after. So, and the kinds of returns that they're going to be looking for are more in line with the kinds of returns that we're trying to provide. So, and it may be that it doesn't actually even need to be, well, anyhow, that's where I think the lawyers could help, because it could be a co-op. And because I think one of the concerns I've had throughout is I do want farmers to be able to have equity. There's something about having skin in the game, having a stake in the commons. I want to figure out how that can happen, but that can be dressed up in a lot of different ways, right? So yeah, and I think it is where's the good enough solution? And I'm also hearing that I don't think any of us have really had time to digest the comments and think about it. So I think this is probably a good enough for now conversation, and we need to come back to this anyhow. We might want to continue parts of it offline, like this would be, if people have a reaction, a thought, feel free to send an email or whatever. Oh, two other things I wanted to just mention. One is I've been in communication with Brad Smith, who has the Resilient Communities Project. He's in Oregon. and he's basically focusing on the Pacific Northwest. And they are also right now looking at legal structures for, they've got something like a dozen property owners who are all interested in something like this. And they're looking to figure out how they can create a legal framework that can be useful in these kinds of projects. So I put the bug in his ear that maybe we could join forces. And, you know, if there's enough overlap in how we're thinking about structuring things, that, you know, we could get one framework that works for a whole bunch of us and split the cost. So that's a possibility that's still out there. I'm tentatively making arrangements to have a conversation with Brad sometime, you know, next week or so. And the other thing I wanted to put out there is just, I had a conversation with a potential client yesterday. They're looking, it's a firm that has 13 staff and they're bringing in 2 interns, and they want to do an offsite retreat. They came to me because they were referred from another client, and what I do with my clients is exactly what we do on the farm, right? Like it's all about integrating peer-to-peer support in evaluative thinking. And they actually were looking, I mentioned that we were trying to put this together as like a retreat center, and they said, oh, would you be available for July? And so I think if right now I got the green light on me being the facilitator for their session, but I think if we had been to a place where we could have hosted them, there would have been a 3-day, 15-person retreat booked in, you know, in a month, 2 months. So I think there is an income potential that, you know, like this is not something that has to be always begging for money to stay afloat. I think there's a way, once we get the foundation, I think that there are ways that we can address those financial questions, you know, like the flow of cash. And so we're not constantly having, I think the reason why I'm so resistant to nonprofits is my experience working with nonprofits where they are constantly begging for money. It is, for me, I do not want to live that way. I don't want to go from grant to grant to grant. It's just so insecure. And so that's, you know, for me, that's my mental resistance to the nonprofit. But we could run a nonprofit not like that. Yeah, exactly, Barbara. It's a scarcity mindset. It's anyhow. So I've rambled on. I'm going to go around the circle again. I know Barbara needs to get going soon, so I'm thinking about kind of wrapping it up. And actually, Barbara, do you want to say a word before you go to wrap up for you?
Gratitudes, endless and forever and always gratitudes.
All right, Becca, over to you.
Yes, I think we can ask the lawyers to fit their work within the budget with, you know, as long as we're choosing something that they can do within that. I totally hear what you're saying about not wanting to be constantly just asking for grants. I do think that there are a lot of more innovative social entrepreneurship things happening in nonprofit, with the nonprofit as the base. And I'm not saying I'm wedded to that or pushing it, but I think it's worth considering. And I think that this idea of Brad, is that the guy's name that is has that other network of people, is intriguing in the sense that, you know, when we were talking to the lawyers, at some point I said, we have to decide whether we think creating a new innovative legal structure is part of the demonstration goal of this project, or whether that's like letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, and let's you know, jump through hoops. And so, but if there were a partnership where people are also trying to solve a very similar thing and they could pay some of the legal fees, then it might, and the time frame was still within what you need, Steph, then it might be worth, you know, paying more and taking longer to get it, you know, to do something more innovative, to try to do something as innovative as possible. I mean, I'm not opposed to doing that anyway, just that it might, take longer than you all want. Over to Roland.
So what I was hearing was that we are in the place of dynamic tension where we're lowering or changing expectations, and at the same time holding the vision. And that at the base of all of that is the land, and the lifeboat. So that's sort of what I'm hearing is as the dilemma. I'm also seeing that relationality continues to be the basis of all of this stuff. I'm curious about what could be possible with Brad Smith. Yeah. I am also curious, just on a practical level, did you all receive access to the YouTube video of the meeting with the lawyers? Did that work?
I received it, but haven't checked to see whether I could actually access it or not.
Okay. All right. I think I figured it out, and I just needed confirmation that it actually worked. So over to Steph.
Yes, I guess I need to familiarize myself with the document and like think about my timeline too. And yeah, I agree with everything that has been said. Yeah. So, thank you.
Yeah, well, and yeah, I'm not sure what, I guess it's really at next steps right now. And
Mhm.
oh, what was it? There was something that popped into my brain briefly. Timeline. Oh, I think timeline, that's also one of the reasons why we need to get Joey and you, Steph, talking, because, well, and it's always the chicken and the egg with this stuff, right? Because I'm pretty sure one of the things that Joey, the reason that your name came into the first conversation with Joey was it seemed like he had some thoughts about how to basically innovative bridge financing, and he wanted to talk with you about what your needs were, and so and how flexible. So I think in terms of timeline, there may be options somewhere in between pausing and here's a check for the whole thing, that if there's some flexibility there, I think. And that's why it makes me feel like we've got people who want to invest if we have a legal entity, even like not finding our super investor who's going to make it all happen. If we had a legal entity in some way of doing it where the investments could come in as they come in, then that would really ease things up, right? So that's why it's sort of like we need to get something in place so that we can have an entity that can receive money so that we can move this along. And anyhow, so I think that we're not going to figure that out today, and that's okay. We still have the invoice review, and Becca, was there anything on there other than just because I'm glad you brought that up, because I thought it was for like $180, and it's like, oh,
All right,
that's fine for our meeting.
I have to grab a phone call. I have to grab a phone call for a sec. Sorry.
Okay. No worries. Anyhow, so I think that may be the point that Becca was wanting our eyes on. And it also leaves me with a question, because the comments are only on our quick little document. It's not on the bylaws that we actually sent. And I'm wondering, like, those bylaws, would they work? Or, like, would it be quicker to edit them? Because it sounds like they're, anyhow. So that's one of my open questions for them is, did they look at the actual draft charter? Because that might make a difference in what we're talking about. Anyhow, I'm feeling like we're a little bit past time. If we want to try to stick to the hour, and So I am thinking, are we good on, let's stall until Becca's back. Then, because what I'm thinking is, really the question is, or do we feel good to go? We're going to be meeting again in 2 weeks. In between, we can invite you to that meeting, can be back and on the document and sharing thoughts. And yeah, is there anything else that we need to talk about, or any actions that we need to get on the list? So actually, I think we can bring Becca back up to speed when she gets back. So Roland, how are you feeling? Are you good to go, or is there anything else that we still need to talk about?
I think I'm good to go, and I agree with the next steps. And there's also sort of um, what is the distribution of tasks in those next steps? Who is doing what?
Cool.
So over Steph.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Tell me what to do.
Yeah, cool. Well, I guess actually,
Yeah.
since it's just the three of us,
Mhm.
at the moment, how do you want us to do the invitation with Joey? I mean, we could just send an email to
Mhm.
both of you saying, hey, by the way, do you guys want to have a conversation, or do you want us
Yeah.
to talk to Joey and say, would you be willing to set a time to talk to Steph?
Mm.
And do you want
If
us to be there? Because that's
if he's okay with that contact sharing, so if we have his approval, then you can just send like a group thing to connect us. And yeah, because maybe he has an idea that I don't have because I don't know anything about this stuff. So yes, that would be good. And I'm
I'll
open.
I'll just say that, and this is where part of my tension about how to communicate with Joey is that he doesn't always reply.
Yeah, yeah.
He has told me that he often loses things in his email, so I will follow up with a text, and this is where my tension is. Like, am I just nagging, or am I just following up? So we can do the email introduction, and
Joey
if
does.
there's no reply, then I can I can poke with a text, and I may send a message to say, "Are you guys okay with me doing this?" Just because I need to know that I need to have that support.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and if it is like an email that's it's like, sharing your contact info with Steph, like
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe it's a different subject. And then because often, so for me too, because my inbox gets very, very full with overnight, with messages of things that I have to like do thoughtful responses. And the more the response requires from me, the
Yeah.
less I'm going to answer that email. So I have like hundreds of emails that require more than a paragraph from me that I am probably not going to answer. But if it's like a thing that I can do in one sentence, and I know this sounds really bad, but it just is kind of
I-
like to make it so that I'm spending less than 3 hours on email every day.
That
It
is
kind of has to be that I ignore everything that's more than a couple sentences of response.
that's
just
super
ditto,
useful.
ditto, ditto.
That
And
is
that
super
is,
useful. Yeah, that's
yeah,
good for me. That's really good for me.
yeah. And it's the kind of thing too, where if it's, I'm probably more likely to respond to email with one question than
Yes.
one email with the same 3
Yes.
questions.
Me too. So it's like sharing contact info with Steph. Can I share your contact info with Steph? Then
Yes, yes,
that's the kind of
no.
thing I would
Yeah,
respond to.
yeah,
Yes or
yeah,
hell no. Yeah, then at least we can move on from there with clarity. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's funny to I am so I've actually been worried. I think my inbox anxiety has just it's grown. now
Yeah.
I'm like even more hypersensitive to like, I'll look at a message. I'm like, I can't look at that.
Oh,
You
me
know?
too. Yeah, it's like, oh, I don't want to mark it red. I'm not even going to click on it because then, like, yes, it's a
I've got
lot.
one
Yeah.
now too, and it's like it's probably a simple question, but I'm like, but it's a simple answer that I've got to think carefully about. You know, like
Mhm.
I've got to say it the right way,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, I can't do that. I just can't. Yeah, actually, and I think it's a cosmic sign that we should be wrapping up anyhow.
Mhm.
And I think we're pretty much good to go. And
So well, there's still a couple of things that we can probably do via email, and it is what are the next steps and who's doing what.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think we've got the who's doing what. I can take on a couple of those. It's no biggie. So I think anyhow. Um, but and I just wanted to tag on to with the more context and the simple question. Formatting counts. Bullet points
Mhm.
are a good thing. Numbered lists are a good thing. And, bold, like this is the question, yes, no, and here's, other stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, formatting counts. All right. Well, it's great seeing you,
Thank
Steph,
you.
and
Yeah.
we'll be, in touch in one way or another in the near future.
Yeah. I'll speak to
And
you on email or something.
oh,
Yeah.
I think, are you just back?
Mm. Ah,
Okay.
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 I'm gonna go. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
then we will adjourn and we'll be in touch. And nice to see you, and we'll talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.